Henry was taken in for questioning, but the police hadn't found any drugs. The stroke of luck they were looking for came in the shape of Henry's girlfriend and drug partner's relaxed approach to domestic hygiene.
They went in the fucking house and fucking vacuum cleaned the fucking walls, all this fucking heroin and coke. They said you could have stayed hard for a fucking year just so the shit was on the wallpaper, you know?
And I said, gotcha.
With overwhelming evidence against him, Henry Hill was facing 25 years to life in prison. And he was a marked man. His drug dealing meant Vario wanted him dead, and former friend Jimmy Burke knew that as the last man alive with inside knowledge of the Lufthansa heist, Henry could lead the feds to his door.
Nobody at that point had any faith that Henry was going to keep his mouth shut.
I knew Paulie was going to whack me, Jimmy was going to whack me, you know. It was so fucking crazy, you know.
He could have counted the days before he was killed.
But the FBI offered Henry a way out. In return for his inside information on the Lufthansa heist, he would receive immunity on the drugs charges.
So he was an easy case. I mean, he was facing 5-7 life sentences.
Henry had no option but to break the most important mafia rule of all: never rat on your friends.
He loathed himself for having turned, because his entire life had been based in a world where becoming a rat is the worst thing you could possibly be.
I was becoming a rat, you know what I mean? A fucking stool pigeon. And, you know, I mean, I just couldn't even fantasize, you know. There was a time in my life that I would have put a fucking gun in my fucking mouth and, you know, blew my fucking brains out before I become a fucking rat, you know what I mean?
On the 22nd of May, 1980, Henry Hill agreed to cooperate with the FBI. This is where the movie Goodfellas ends, but where a 25-year mafia manhunt and Henry's descent into self-destruction began. Hill and his family were moved by the U.S. Marshals to Omaha, Nebraska, to begin their new lives in the Witness Protection Program.
The first night he was in the program and lying in his house in absolute silence in the dark, he said, I was scared out of my mind. Not that the guys from New York were gonna come get me. It's I can't do this normal thing.
It was a culture shock. I mean, seriously, it was. They chew tobacco, and they spit, you know what I mean? Oh. And they talk fucking funny, you know what I mean? They do. I mean, it's like a different country.
Henry had to assume a new identity that would enable him to travel back to New York to begin his debriefing. He chose Martin Lewis, insurance adjuster.
I'd be gone all the time. I'm investigating an arson in fucking Boston and, you know, this and that, you know. And they fucking believe me, you know?
In New York, Hill began his debriefing about the Lufthansa robbery so the FBI could finally get to Jimmy Burke and Paul Vario. But his free-roaming testimony inadvertently incriminated other mafia members.
You know, I just told the fucking truth, and every time I told the truth, it opened another fucking can of worms, and, you know, and it started another investigation and another fucking case, and I had no idea that this was going on.
We were able to make some significant cases and develop all sorts of other evidence that led to other investigations and prosecutions.
You know, and then I said, well, you know, you gotta go on a stand. And I said, no, I didn't make that fucking deal with you guys. Well, you don't want to fucking stand, you know?
Hill was forced to take the witness stand and come face to face with the mafia bosses he was betraying.
It was tough. I mean, looking at these fucking guys, you know what I mean? These bosses of bosses and shit, you know?
They were absolutely the highest quality targets that we had in the most difficult cases that we had, and Henry was an extraordinarily valuable witness.
He did his job for the feds. I mean, he showed up in the courts in New York, came back many times, and was invaluable in breaking down a huge gang empire in New York.
Henry's testimony helped convict over 50 mafia members.
They were not going to take this lying down. They were going to look for Henry, and they were going to look to have him executed.
Back in Omaha, Henry began to spiral out of control.
Part of him wanted to mess up and punish himself, so he was becoming extremely self-destructive.
I couldn't live with myself. I mean, I just should take a bottle of Stolies and fucking drink it every night, you know what I mean?
He was a total coke freak, pill freak. I mean, he was on everything that he could take. He would ingest anything.
In between trials, the FBI was continuing to debrief Hill about Lufthansa, as he was the last surviving witness.
We were running through the robbery and where he was during the robbery, and Henry said, well, I was in Pittsburgh. Ed or I said, well, what were you doing in Pittsburgh? And Henry kind of smiled his little smile and said, well, you're not going to like this.
3 years before his arrest, Henry Hill and Jimmy Burke were fixing basketball games at Boston College. Ironically, the team Ed McDonald used to play for.
I said, you're completely nuts. I said, you got a real serious problem here.
Motherfucker almost leaped over the fucking table. He tried to grab me, but he went berserk.
Together, Burke and Hill had bribed 3 players to fix the results of basketball games, including starting center Rick Kuhn, who was dragged in front of the U.S. courts. With Kuhn and Hill's testimony, the FBI could finally bring Burke to trial. Burke was arrested. Suspected of murdering at least 50 people, the mastermind of the Lufthansa robbery would face trial on a seemingly innocuous gambling scam. And on the 27th of October 1981 began the U.S. versus Jimmy Burke.
The courtroom was packed with media, with organized crime figures, and with people who were interested in the case.
Henry Hill would once again have to take the stand, this time against his former mafia mentor.
I felt like a fucker. I mean, I had to look at him, but I knew that this motherfucker ordered my death, you know what I mean?
Before the trial, the FBI played Hill wiretap evidence of Burke ordering his execution.
I didn't believe him, you know what I mean? And they played me the fucking tape. I mean, which they shouldn't have, you know what I mean? When a cocksucker ordered my death, you know what I mean? They'll whack him. I mean, that's what it became, you know what I mean?
Henry was ruthless. I mean, he was a cornered rat. And while he might have been uncomfortable testifying against these people, he recognized that these people were looking to kill him.
I was able to look the cocksucker in the eye, you know what I mean? I said, Jimmy, you didn't get me, motherfucker. No, I got you.
Jimmy Burke was convicted and would spend the rest of his life in prison.
At the end, I was just, disposable. I was just, they were gonna kill me.
Hill's testimony would be equally damaging to Paul Vario, on trial for extortion at Kennedy Airport.
Put his fucking head down. Fuck you, we didn't kill you, you cocksucker. You got us. Yeah, I got you. Motherfucker, you got my wife and my fucking kids, motherfucker. You know what I mean? I knew what they were capable of. I seen it all my life growing up.
Henry's testimony helped convict Paul Vario. He was sentenced to a total of 12.5 years in Pittsburgh Federal Penitentiary. Behind bars, Jimmy Burke organized a relentless campaign to have Hill found and executed.
He would have been just mutilated for what he had done.
Henry Hill would spend the next 25 years running for his life. In 1980, Henry Hill became a government informant, betraying his childhood friends Jimmy Burke and Paul Vario, condemning them to spend the rest of their lives behind bars.
I beat them to the punch. You know what I mean? I did.
Burke had issued a multi-million-dollar contract on Henry Hill's life. There would be plenty of takers.
They were gonna kill me. Or kill my wife, or kill my kids, or, anything to get to me.
They would all love to make their bones killing Henry Hill.
Henry Hill had been secretly moved to Omaha, Nebraska, and placed in the witness protection program to safeguard him from mafia reprisals.
They looked out for me. They knew what the fuck it was. It was a big fucking deal back in 1980, Being a rat, I was the first fucking guy,
He was clearly in a great deal of danger. His family was in a great deal of danger.
In 1981, through a government informant, the FBI received the news they had been dreading. Burke was closing in.
Burke had somebody that told him where Henry was allegedly at. They notified us and we don't take chances. We moved him out. Phone rang. Show some clothes in your fucking bag, we'll be there. We're outside right now. I believe he had about 24 hours. Gotta go.
Throughout the 80s, Hill and his family were moved repeatedly by the US government. The threat of mafia execution was ever present.
He was in a great deal of danger, and this contributed in many ways to his alcoholism and his drug addiction.
He became highly addicted to cocaine and heroin and you name it.
And Henry's drug addiction was about to lead him into the arms of the mafia. In the mid-1980s, Henry Hill had been moved to Washington. With a serious addiction and mounting debts, he returned to his life of narcotics dealing. And in Washington, Hill fell foul of an undercover police sting.
I knew the guy was a fucking cop the minute I met him. You know what I mean? He was a fucking agent. I knew it. And I couldn't convince these other fucking assholes. And they dealt with him. I got popped.
Henry Hill was arrested on narcotics charges. Worse still, he had lost his witness protection status through 7 years of continually breaking every rule in the program.
The witness protection program failed, in my view, for Henry because Henry is a weak person. He wasn't able to discipline himself and to change his life.
Passing bad checks and calling home back to New York, which was a no-no. That was forbidden.
Don't use the phone. Go fuck yourself. You know what I mean? Fuck out of here.
It's not so much that the program failed Henry as that Henry failed himself. And his usefulness for the government at that point was pretty much at an end.
He had already given up everything he had to offer to negotiate. He had nothing left.
It was a strong case. He went to trial. He was convicted.
Things couldn't have been worse for Hill. Awaiting sentencing, he was sent to Terminal Island in California, a prison populated with mafia inmates.
When he arrived, he found out that there were members of the East Coast Mafia who knew who he was and what he had done to their guys back east.
They were doing time there, They were doing life sentences and fucking 20 years and all this other fucking shit. Well, they tried to kill me.
2 attempts were made on Hill's life. And though his usefulness to the government was over, Ed McDonald came to his rescue one last time.
I wrote a letter because I thought it was only fair to talk about the convictions and the cases that he had contributed to. The judge waved the letter in front of the prosecutor and said that because of what Henry had done and because of the pressures that he was under, he was going to sentence him to a probationary sentence.
I had to do another year in drug rehab, and they sent me to this fucking, place where I, supposedly got rehabilitated.
Finally, Hill received some good news. Wise Guy, his autobiography co-written with Nick Pileggi, was to be made into a Hollywood movie.
Scorsese called me. He wants to do the movie. Get the fuck out of here. Yeah. He's gonna give you $500,000. I say, okay. Another fucking payday, I mean, seriously, $500,000.
Henry had to work hard for his money. Robert De Niro constantly phoned him for advice on how to perfect his portrayal of Jimmy Burke, ironically the man who wanted Henry dead.
He's on the fucking phone constantly. I mean, like fucking 7, 8 times a day. He wouldn't leave his fucking trailer without talking to me twice. Jimmy needed it. How did Jimmy hold a cigarette? I thought he was a fucking nut job.
When filming had finished and De Niro had left Henry alone, he was smuggled onto the Warner Brothers lot for a secret screening of Goodfellas.
I mean, how could you imagine yourself, on a fucking big silver screen, you know what I mean? And it was me, you know what I mean? This fucking kid nailed it. I had a lot of fun. I had, a lot of money and all that fucking, insane fucking shit. But yet, at the end of the fucking night, I slept with a pistol in my fucking pillow.
Throughout the making of Goodfellas, the threats on Hill's life and his life on the run continued. But the main threat ended on the 13th of April 1996, when Jimmy Burke died of lung cancer in prison.
It was a fucking relief, you know what I mean?